Hey everyone, this is Jennifer Beamer, owner-operator of ExpertlyDyed Art by Science, and today I wanted to do a little review of what I spun during the Tour de Fleece. First of all, I wanted to shout out a big thank you to everyone who watched my daily updates during the Tour de Fleece, and for everyone who subscribed. I very much appreciate it, and I'm glad I was able to connect with so many new subscribers. So in this video, I wanted to just talk really briefly about what I managed to spin, which arguably was more than I might have, considering that my mom was here for 3 weeks, and probably not as much as I would have if it was just me and my normal day-to-day routine. But the first thing that I wanted to spin was this beautiful little mulberry silk that I dyed a long time ago. So this is about all that I have left, which isn't currently on the loom. Now, during one of my updates, I did say that I was going to work on projects with the hand spun as I was making it, as sort of like a concurrent project. And then that quickly went south because obviously when you have house guests, and especially if they're not familiar with the area and there's no cars to help them get around, we don't drive here. I had to be an extra special host, so I had no time to do any more of my weaving project, which I will be getting back to, and I will film some of the footage and post that for you guys in the future, because I think it's kind of interesting watching the types of decisions others make when they're weaving something. And since I'm using a variety of different yarns in that particular project, I thought it would be good for you guys to see how it comes together. Now, the second part of my Tour de Fleece spin was spinning all of this Gulf Coast native. Now, when I was in the US, pretty much right at the start of the pandemic, I bought this at one of the local knitting shops in Athens, Georgia. And I was really excited because I did not expect to see anything like this there, since it was predominantly for knitting and crocheting supplies. But they did have this little basket full of rovings that were relatively inexpensive considering, and then I decided to buy almost everything because I was a bit greedy, but not too greedy. I wanted to leave a little bit there in case someone else happened along to find it. So in total, I had 278 grams of this Gulf Coast native, and I would be talking about this in a Fiber Talk episode either before this video or after this video, so make sure you check out my channel to see what I say about it. But it was probably the longest part of my spin, and as it went on, I didn't actually have a lot of time to just sit down and bust right through it. So rather than just subjecting everyone to endless hours of me spinning this stuff, I decided to intersperse other aspects of my day into those videos just to make them a little bit more interesting and actually a greater reflection of what my day-to-day is generally like. So hopefully you enjoyed that, and you will go off and see that Fiber Talk episode. So this is now done, and in total I had 632 yards of a traditional 3-ply, so I spun 3 bobbins and then plied them together, 2 on my Lazy Kate and the other one in my beautiful Amazon Prime box. Because why not? You know, you have it, why not use it? So that was 632 yards. 278 grams, which is 2.27 yards per gram. So this is pretty firmly a DK or double knit gauge. So as I said in a previous video, in fact it was day 0, if you want to go back and watch that video, I basically said I wanted to make a blanket, and that was sort of the project I had slated for using this wool, so that when I talk about it again in the future, I've subjected it to a project that I can then follow up with and say whether I thought it was good for the project or not. Since mostly the Fiber Talk episodes that I've been posting where I'm not constantly using that type of wool, I sort of guess what I think might be really good for this type of wool. And even if that is a really good guess, sometimes it can be a little off. The third thing that I was going to spin was this lovely cormo that I bought and then dyed. So I actually had two batches. I had some of it that I dyed ages ago, probably back in 2012, I want to say. And it looked kind of like a bruised banana color, and I had it in my inventory for a long time, and then I put it in my stash because I wasn't quite happy with the color, and then I thought, well, I'll do something with that later. So later came, and I decided, well, I'm just going to over dye it, so that's what I did. And if you want to see what I did for the dyeing, there is another video that will be coming out either now or in the future where I show you some of my little tips for dyeing wool. So I had basically two groups of the same cormo from the same particular farm, and one of them is dyed so that there's slightly more of like the pinkish hues, and then the other one, which is slightly more of those muted oranges, so that's the one that I over dyed because I wasn't as huge of a fan of the color. I was then when I dyed it, but not anymore. So never think that your wool is ruined because the color is not what you want it to be, because you can either blend it with other colors or you can over dye it. So by all means, if it needs to be fixed, just give it a little sprucing up. So this one I managed to spin and almost completely chain ply, so this is a Navajo ply, before the end of the Tour de Fleece. Just to kind of complete this project, I also have its sister skein almost done. It's probably got about an hour and a half left to go, so I'm going to finish spinning that, and then I will also chain ply it. This one was 210 yards, and I think this one was the 4 ounce, or just under 4 ounces, like 3.8 ounces. So I'm surprised that it is so dense. 210 yards, I would have expected it to be a little lighter and loftier, so I'm going to chalk that up to my spinning. So yeah, now in total this is only about 832 yards, and from what I've gathered so far, I probably have in the ballpark of around 175 yards once the other skein is finished, because that one was only about 3.1 ounces. So in all, about 1,000 yards. And I did do a lot of spinning. The silk one I think was 124 yards, so really not a whole lot in total. So, you know, sometimes that just happens. You get going and you think, oh, I better, you know, prepare about 10 pounds of wool because I'm going to spin it all, because that's sort of the focus, is I'm going to spin every day. And I think this kind of happened to me a little bit, where I a little bit over prepared, but not quite entirely. So I still have a little bit in reserve, so I'm going to just spin that probably off camera, or maybe actually during one of my Sunday live streams. Okay, so I lied. Let me explain. So I did do a little supported spindling, because on some of the days we were basically traveling all day, so I didn't have any time in the morning, because if everyone wants coffee and bathroom time, there's really not a lot of opportunity for me to do much in the way of filming. So one of the wonderful things about having spindles is how incredibly portable it is. So some of my updates that you may have seen during the Tour de Fleece, particularly the one in Nottingham, we managed to stop for a coffee, and I spun this for about less than 10 minutes, and that counted as my day's spin. So you got to see pretty much most of the spinning that I did that particular day. Now, not everyone has their range of spindles, but if you do have them, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So it was kind of fun being able to switch between having spinning wheel projects and also my spindle project so that I could still keep up with the challenge. And I'm really glad that I already had some project idea in mind for this. Otherwise, I might have completely forgotten that I had spindles, and I don't know how that's possible, but you know how it goes. In terms of my projects, I still have the one that's on the loom right now, which is comprised of predominantly really fine yarns, which I love, but that project is going to take a little bit longer just because of how fine the yarns are. But once that particular project is completed, I'm going to load these yarns up onto my Kromsky harp loom and weave a blanket. But you're probably noting that 1,000 yards is probably not quite enough for a blanket, especially if you consider my desire to have a blanket that I can put up on my shoulders and have my feet completely covered and my legs tucked in and a cat laying on me, because Layla loves my ankles. So anytime I take a blanket out, no matter where she is, she hears this rustling and then comes running, and then she looks, oh, is that for me? So it has to withstand her sort of like glomming on and making it so that I can't really easily adjust. So I can't have a blanket that's just a little bit big enough. I need it to be substantially big enough in order to cover all of these things. Because there's nothing worse than a cat laying on your ankles and then your feet suddenly exposed to the cold air. So I may need to find some other kind of red or autumnal colors to add to this, or I might add in some hand-dyed yarn. This is the most ridiculous skein of yarn I've ever made. Ta-da! It's literally as big as my head. So this is my newest colorway called Pumpkin, and this one's going to be photographed. It's 100% repeatable in the colorway, and it might actually go really well with some of the colors I've already selected. So we've got here these three in combination. So we've got kind of like some orangey yellows, some pinks, and then some reds. So we might go in this direction, or this one, which I'm calling Last Harvest. And again, as large as my head, I might actually Princess Leia hair, my little buns. Oh my goodness. So yeah, so this has some really lovely colors, some oranges and reds, some kind of like pinky tones, as well as purples. And it may also go well with these colors, this beautiful russet red and then sort of these pinky tones of the Cormo. And the sister skein to this Cormo is very similar to some of the oranges in this one. Yeah. So I don't exactly know what I'm gonna do with this here. But one of the things that I love about hand spun is how nicely it contrasts with hand dyed yarn. So if you can see some of these color variations in here, yeah. So this is going to stand out in terms of color, right? Much more bold than even say this one will, or obviously in comparison to this one, which is much more subtle. So one of the things that you also get is textural. So you've got the color and you've also got the textural difference, where this Cormo, I actually had a little bit of trouble just getting it to draft nicely, even though I did all the pre-drafting. It might have been really compacted from having been shuffled around and compressed for about 10 years. So you can kind of see here that it isn't as smoothly spun as many of my other skeins have been. So if you are familiar with some of the other videos on my channel, the hand spun merino that I'm doing for a sweater project, that one is like almost machine spun in its consistency, but this one, there's definitely some thicker spots than others. So, you know, these things, they kind of happen, so I'm not really too worried about it. But in contrast to something that is machine made, you know, the differences in the yarn diameter is going to be very nearly perfect. So, you know, if you want to have something visual in terms of color and textural, then combining a commercially spun yarn with your hand spun actually just adds more depth. So if you are a new spinner and maybe Tour de Fleece was sort of like your first experience doing something together as a community, this is a really great way to use your hand spun. But maybe if you're not, you know, up to producing large quantities of hand spun for a larger project, like maybe a woven blanket, then this is an excellent way to combine these together. Now, the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about in terms of my experience with Tour de Fleece, this was the very first year where I not only spun every day, but I also endeavored to film, edit, and upload a new video every day as well. Now, this was sort of my personal challenge because on my end, a lot of the stuff you never see, you never hear about, but as a content creator, I am constantly plagued with algorithms. So if I put something up on YouTube, I get response and it says, hey, we love this video, but then a couple of days later you see how your analytics start to die down because most of the people who watch your channel regularly have already seen that content. Then you start to feel a little bit anxious thinking, well, I want to put up a new video, but then you've got all this other work you need to do. So in addition, I also work 20 hours a week. That's my consistent paid work. And then I also am a hand dyer, so I'm hand dyeing and developing yarn and fiber. I'm constantly dyeing fiber and I'm making bats, and then I'm doing a bunch of administrative stuff, test spinning all of the spindles and coordinating everything for ExpertlyDyed. So even if I want to put out a new video, I have to schedule it in and then set aside time for it, and if it's something I need to prep for, all of that goes into it. So one of the things I wanted to prove to myself was, actually, you might be complaining a bit too much. And this was true. So if I really wanted to put a video out every day, I probably could, but it wouldn't be good for the channel. So this was a good opportunity for me to kind of test out my abilities, my skills, to see if I could do it. And I've proven, at least with the first part of this challenge, I could. So that satisfies me enough to consider the challenge completed, even though there towards the end I had to kind of skip some days because it was so hot. It was a record over 40 degrees Celsius, which is over 100 degrees in the UK, and we've also had drought, so there was no editing, hardly any spinning going to be done on those days. But the other thing was, it told me that I need to refocus the way that I schedule my time. And so even though this isn't going to really impact you on your side, you'll still see regular content. As I said in my last Tour de Fleece episode, I think this is probably the first successful week that I have had in a long time where I've managed to get everything done in a timely manner and I'm not working myself to death. burnout is real, and I definitely do not want to achieve any kind of burnout because I do this for fun. I do this for you guys because I want to put out educational content, and I also do it for my research. So for those of you who are still kind of new to me, I have a doctorate in archaeology where I looked at Iron Age textile production and the textile tools. So in my professional life, I do want to continue publishing, hopefully through open access. And if I get too overwhelmed with what I'm doing and I'm constantly fighting my own schedule that I'm the one creating, this is not going to be good for you either, because I'm not putting out reliable content, the content itself isn't very good, and the more disjointed I become, the harder it is to understand what I'm talking about through my rambling. Bonus content, I wanted to announce in this video that we are moving to Cirencester, UK. So we are leaving Leicester, which has been my home since September 19th of 2015, where I've completed 3 out of the last 5 degrees, so 2 master's degrees and a PhD from the University of Leicester. And we're pretty happy about this move. So we are moving to a smaller town, which suits us personally, but with that obviously comes certain disruptions. I'm working very hard on my end to minimize the disruptions, but you know, with all things, there might be something that goes wrong, or I might not have internet for a week or 2. So I'm going to do my best to get as much done and ready to go so that all I have to do is release it, so that on your end, I pretty much seamlessly transition from house to house, even though if you've ever moved, especially across multiple counties, it can be a little bit challenging, and also with pets, and when you don't have a car, don't have a car yet, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I hope that everything goes well, and if something happens and it doesn't work out, then I'll still try to do some live streams, although it's probably going to be with a spindle like this rather than with my wheel, which is totally fine because there are many people out there who use spindles rather than wheels. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So my partner got his dream job, and so we're gonna be moving there. And actually, even though I was leaving a job and going down there with no job, I pretty much have a job lined up. So it's just a matter of packing everything up and moving everything down there. So yeah, it's going to be probably just a few days when I might have to delay sending out orders, or maybe I'm not as responsive whenever people post comments, which I have really tried to go back and answer questions and reply to comments from the Tour de Fleece. So yeah, please bear with me as I go through this transition. We've lived in our current house for over 5 years, so there is some stuff that we need to kind of sort through. Always a fun task. Now, on your end, what would help me a lot is if there was anything in my shop that you were kind of like, I need some more wool after the Tour de Fleece, or maybe you saw me spinning with my supported spindle and you thought, I think I want to give this, spinning a try. I do have some things in my shop, and the more that I can liquidate, the easier it's going to be to move everything, and the extra funds will be a huge boon. So as I said, we don't have a car, so we have to rely on various methods of commuting down there, and it's not as easy to get to the location as it is in Leicester. So we're going to be spending more money on commuting and getting everything set up with the shipping company. So if you are interested in anything in my shop, I greatly appreciate anyone who buys anything. And also the same on my website. So I am still kind of getting everything reorganized on both sites so that everything is actually the same. So if you want to buy on Etsy, that's fine. If you want to buy on my website, that's also fine. So yeah, just kind of sorting through some of those inconsistencies. But if you ever see something on one site that's on the other, you can also, tell me about it, and I will set it up so that it's on your preferred platform. Just send me a message. Okay, so that is it for me. Some major news, fun little update, and general chat with you guys, and I hope you liked watching that. If you want to support me as a creator, I'm also on Patreon. So if you are a Patreon member, you get first access to all of my videos ad-free for the first 24 hours, and bonus behind the scenes content and other types of content that I hope to develop in the future. And now with my new scheduling tactics, that will actually be a realistic goal. But otherwise, that's all for me. I'm going to see you in the next video. We'll see you then. Bye!